This is A to Z with Mark Zinno, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it starts now.
Good afternoon. Welcome to A to Z here on Locked On Sports Atlanta, where today I remind you it's really busy this time of year. Welcome in. We are live here on this Tuesday. So much to get to as the trade deadline is now within hours. It was a busy last 24 hours for the Atlanta Braves. We'll get to that in just a moment. Remind you guys to give us a follow on Twitter at Locked On ATL. Of course, I'm at Mark Zinno. We have some updates from Falcons camp to get to as well, and some more NFL news as the wake of the Deshaun Watson ruling still reverberating throughout the rest of the league. But manifesto, let's start with the Atlanta Braves and welcome in at the top of the show, the only person who you need to talk to when it comes to anything Atlanta Braves, our good friend, Grant McAuley. Of course, you can hear him on the Braves POSTCAST as well from the Diamond, the podcast, and on 92.9 The Game. Grant, all right, welcome, and it's very, very busy. Let's start with the easy part first. And the easy part is the extension of Austin Riley for 10 years and $212 million. So another guy that they seemingly got on the cheap, although $21 million is not cheap, comparatively speaking, if Austin Riley were to produce the year that he's having this year for the next 2 or 3 years in arbitration, his long-term contract would exceed $30 million in value easily. So this is sort of on the cheap, but the reaction to the deal, obviously good. How do you feel about this, and what was kind of how this all came down and got done?
Yeah, I mean, it's thrilling if you're the Atlanta Braves, and it's, I think, thrilling if you're Austin Riley to sign a $200+ million contract that keeps you in the uniform that you came up in and that you just won a World Series in. So you've got that in your pocket, pretty much literally and figuratively speaking. But there's some cost certainty that's attached to this deal that I think is obviously good for the Braves. You mentioned $21 or so million on average per season. There's an 11th year that's a $20 million option. So this thing could be worth $232 million over the next 11 seasons. And you've got Austin Riley playing at an MVP level here in 2022, following up his breakout season of 2021. And I thought it was, interesting to hear the comments of Dansby Swanson after the walk-off win over the Diamondbacks on Sunday. It's not that Austin Riley got hot. It's that this is who he is, and he continues to get better. Now, will he be an MVP candidate every single season for the next 10 years? Who knows? We'll find out. But I think he can be an impact player for the Braves for a long time. And now you've got him locked up across the diamond from Matt Olson. You got Ozzie Albies long-term under control. You got Ronald Acuna Jr. signed to a long-term contract. So the pieces, the pillars of this club, many of them are under contract for the Braves for some time to come. So this is exciting for Atlanta. This is a big deal for Austin Riley, and this is something that I think continues to create the belief, and it very much should, that the Braves are here to stay and that they are building for the future, and that future is quite bright.
You also left out Michael Harris, Spencer Strider, Kyle Wright, like all these guys under contract through 2027, at least team control through 2027. Now, you know me, I just look at everything from every angle. The downside to a 10-year contract is similar to what the downside that you got with 10-year contracts for Ozzie Albies and Ronald Acuna. Albies is hurt and can't play, and Acuna is underperforming. While these guys are under team control, the problem is that if for whatever reason they don't continue to produce at the level that they is, that value that you're getting now slowly starts to come down. That's the danger in any 10-year contract. It's not just these particular players. It's any contract of this length that really presents that danger. Why do Austin Riley this contract now when a guy like Dansby Swanson is pending free agency? Like, that's the only other thing to me that seems a little bit off, where I could give Austin Riley this contract next year and it would still be great value, but I'm looking at possibly losing Dansby Swanson.
Well, I don't know that those two things are necessarily all tied together.
Related,
because the Braves are a club that has moved back into the top 10 in payroll, which is something that people should take note of. And from conversations I've had with people who would know these things and with people who are around for these things and these conversations, with the success on the field, with the success financially this club is having, they see this number continuing to grow. So this record payroll is not just a 2022 or 2023 thing. It's something that's projectable going forward because the business model they have, quite simply, is helping them to print money at a rate hitherto unheard of for the Braves franchise. And that's a great thing. But, just to go back to Ronald Acuna Jr. and Ozzie Albies, I mean, those contracts are such extreme values for this club. I don't see any way possible. I mean, Ozzie Albies' injury notwithstanding, that's not a long-term career-threatening thing for him. It's
Right.
something that is unfortunate. He'll have to go through it. And Ronald Acuna Jr., while he has had a rough month of July, this is not the player that Ronald is long-term. It's not the player that he's shown himself over the first 4 years. Everybody goes through things, whether it's injuries or inconsistency. It's the great ones and even the good ones that find their way through that. And Ronald Acuna Jr. on a bad year, I think, is good to great. And on a great year is one of the best players in baseball. So I wouldn't spend any time, being the least bit worried about that contract, the value of it, and what it means going forward for him or Ozzy Albies for that matter. But for Dansby, it's a different situation. I mean, free agency is awaiting. He does have the same representation as Freddie Freeman did. So there's a lot of things baked into that pie.
All right, we'll turn our attention to the Major League Baseball trade deadline and the moves that the Braves made. But first, a word from our good friends at Dave. We've all been in a situation at some point in our lives where we're a little tight on cash. Maybe you couldn't afford to put a few extra gallons of gas in your car, or you have an occasion coming up where you need an expensive gift. Well, that's where Dave can help. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to make ends meet, it can be really stressful when expenses come up. Now, Dave can get you out of a pinch when you really need it. Dave is the banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with extra cash. That's more money to fill your tank, catch up on some bills, finally tackle those expenses that have been stressing you out. Any hangups? There's no interest, no credit check needed. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get financial relief when they need it with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch, need some extra help, download Dave. Think of it as a helping hand to the future you. Download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's DAVE. Sign up for extra cash and an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. The terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve, member FDIC. All right, let's get back to the Atlanta Braves here with Grant McAuley from our Braves Postcast and 92.9 The Game from the Diamond Podcast. The biggest move right now, I think, is the Jake Odorizzi one because you gave up the most, or at least the most notable commodity for it in Will Smith with the Houston Astros. Clearly, the starting pitching at the back end of the rotation was a concern. Even though Ian Anderson had a good start last time out, he just hasn't been anything resembling the pitcher he was last year. And Charlie Morton has had more struggles this year than good starts. So Odorizzi, question one, where does he slide in as far as the rotation is concerned? And is there an odd man out?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see long-term if there is an odd man out here. But, the Houston Astros had so much rotational depth that this was a piece that they could afford to move. I mean, the Braves, with Will Smith being really just not effective this year, and especially not effective over the last, 3-4 weeks, this was a really fascinating trade and not one I necessarily expected to see. But when it came to, rotational depth, that's something I feel like the Braves could be tested in for a number of different reasons. Yeah, you've got a couple of guys who haven't necessarily performed to the level that you expected, and Ian Anderson in particular, and Charlie Morton to a lesser level. And then you've got Spencer Strider, who's going to throw the most innings he's thrown in any season if he remains healthy in his professional career. That's something you need to factor in. And then you have to make sure that if anything would happen to any member of this rotation, do you have somebody that you can turn to that you feel like they can hold down that spot? So I think that's where Odorizzi comes in. And in the short term, as far as odd man out and some of the other plans, the Braves have a couple of doubleheaders coming up, one notably in New York, another that will be happening the next weekend in Miami. So that might lead them to needing a sixth starter, if you will, for a minute. So we'll see exactly how that all plays out. But I think that's where Odorizzi fits in the short term. Long term, once you get into the latter part of August and you start figuring out who starts when and where, maybe having a guy like Odorizzi is an opportunity to skip a start for a couple of different guys, manage their innings a little bit, not just Spencer Strider, but anybody that might need it as you go down the stretch, but also have someone who you believe is a major league capable, major league ready starter, as opposed to just kind of trying to spin the wheel and hope that a young pitcher can come up in the heat of a pennant race and give you what you need there. So I think that's some of the thinking that's gone into going out and getting a veteran starting pitcher like Jake Odorizzi.
And it tells you a ton about how much faith they have in the rest of the bullpen, that they were willing to deal when everyone's looking for bullpen arms at the trade deadline. They were willing to deal at least one of the ones that helped them win a World Series last year as it was underperformed. So I think they got a lot of confidence there. The other move, outfielder Robbie Grossman, on the surface does not, move the needle in any size, way, shape, or form. It's a guy who's hitting 205 with 2 home runs and 23 RBIs. That's exactly 2 or more home runs than you and I have this season. Now, I'm not going to get hung up on that because I remember when they traded for Jock Peterson, he was batting 240 with 8 home runs, and he was such an integral part of what they did. And I think I mentioned the same thing to somebody about Tyler Knockin for the Mets. He was batting like 240 with 7 home runs. Like, those guys can make a difference. That said, he's a switch hitter. He hits great against left-handed pitching from the right side. So this could be not only another platoon situation for Rosario on left, but a guy that could be added pop off the bench when needed.
Yeah, and this is what you were looking for, I think, if you're the Braves, is somebody to help, ease the loss of the right-handed power that you had from Adam Duvall, somebody that can play the corner outfield spots, which Grossman certainly can, and just a guy that allows for Eddie Rosario to hopefully be Eddie Rosario and do most of his damage against right-handed pitching. A platoon partner, as you pointed out, is exactly what I think the Braves needed in this case. I mean, you'd love to see a splashier move if there was one out there, but I'm not sure that the Braves needed to just go out and empty the farm to make a splash move to get a huge bat in the middle of their lineup to solve problems that may not actually be there. But that aside, I mean, you got to have Eddie Rosario produce. You got to have Ronald Acuna Jr. produce. And where Robbie Grossman fits in is that role that Adam Duvall had as a right-handed power hitter. He was a 2020 guy a year ago with a 114 weighted runs created plus. He does have 1,000 OPS against lefties this year in 100 plate appearances. So if you're looking for a guy to come in, wear out lefties
good.
and play passable defense in left field or better, this was a nice piece to add, and we'll see if Alex Anthopoulos has bigger designs or other deals that he makes before the deadline.
All right, Grant, one more here, and the one that makes me the most sad because, welcome back, Ergi Adrianza. We hardly forgot that you were here. But this is the move where they DFA'd Robinson Cano in exchange for it. I get he plays a better infield, and you probably focus on defense, but, I love Robbie Cano, soft spot in my heart. But Adrianza here, just I assume that's what he's here for, defensive replacement more than anything.
It's versatility. I mean, this is a guy that can play second, short, and third. He can throw him in the outfield if you need to. He's a switch hitter, and those are all things that, Robinson Cano simply could not do. And Robinson did not get a ton of at-bats, ton of plate appearances. This was a flyer to say, all right, if you come up and catch lightning in a bottle, there's a place for Robinson Cano. If you come up and get a couple of hits in your first game and then 2 more hits and the rest of the time that you play, you're probably not going to hang around a long time. And there were a couple of miscues up in Philadelphia that I think kind of pointed to the fact that at second base, in the absence of Ozzie Albies, you needed somebody who's maybe just a little bit younger, a little bit more capable. And again, once Ozzie comes back, versatile enough to move around and do some other things. So I think that was the answer there. And, you take a flyer on guys. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But Adrianza was a guy that was on the World Series team and somebody that the Braves are happy to welcome back into the fold. And hopefully he has a role to play here in 2022 as the Braves look to do the same.
All right, final thought here real quick. Is Alex Anthopoulos done? I know we got a couple hours left, and whenever you guys are listening to this or watching to it, might have already passed the trade deadline. But do you think he's done, or is he comfortable with where he is?
As of where we sit right now before the trade deadline, I think that there's always time for another deal until that deadline has passed. So I think Alex Anthopoulos could be working on something else, and I wouldn't be surprised to see another deal, maybe 2, that happens before that 6 p.m. Eastern time trade deadline.
All right. Well, you'll see Grant on our Braves postcast throughout the rest of the regular season and on to the playoffs, of course, and catch him on From the Diamond, the podcast, and on 92.9 The Game. Thanks for the time this morning, brother. Appreciate it. Stay well. Enjoy the rest of the day.
You got it.
All right. Take a time out. Come back. The Atlanta Falcons. Not a ringing endorsement of a player is to say these words. I'll tell you that next right here on A to Z on Locked On Sports Atlanta, free on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Search Locked On Sports Atlanta.